Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another episode of The Monster's Den. In the co-captain's chair, as always, Mr. Chris Alo. What's happening, my friend?
How's it going, Pete? Thanks for having me on as always.
Wouldn't be a Monster's Den without you. When
Thank
you're
you.
not here, we feel it, you know. But
Too kind.
so we had an interesting kind of conversation between Chris and I. Originally, we were thinking maybe we could get on the show one or more of the guys from the Exhumed Film Festival to kind of talk about what it's like to put together a horror film festival. And then I'm like, well, wait a second, we really don't even need to do that because we got the guy here right on the show who's put together a film festival of his own for many years.
True.
You've heard us talk about Hudson Horror many times, and I figured, why don't we just get Chris to do a little bit of kind of like storytelling here to talk about like what it's like to put together a film festival, what kind of convinced him to do it himself, and what like are the logistics to putting on a festival of films for 12 hours or whatever it might be. And so I don't know, maybe you could start talking about like how many years you were going to film festivals and what really intrigued you about them early on, and when did you kind of get the bug to say, shit, man, I'd like to do that. I could do this myself. I could pick out the my own films, and and how do you do something like that, right? How do you make that happen?
Right.
So I don't know, maybe you can.
Sure.
I'll
Yeah.
leave it up to you.
Yeah. No problem, Pete. No problem. Yeah. I've just always been a horror movie fan, and I always enjoyed showing friends. Horror movies. When I was younger, I was the first kid on my block to get like a VCR in my room, and then two VCRs, and then a DVD player, and then a Laserdisc player, and then an all-region DVD player, and the first guy that got like a kick-ass surround sound system. So I would always do movie nights with my friends, and at one point I was up to 7 VCRs because I was a tape trader, and I would trade tapes with people from around the country. So I was always getting weird and obscure movies and making my friends watch stuff. Then I started years later, started going to some of the retro horror screenings and a couple of the festivals. And it wasn't that long. I went to a few festivals, Exhumed Films out of Philadelphia, which was the best, and went to a couple other ones. And there was one that I was in up in Syracuse, New York. It was like a 10 or 12 hour, horror movie festival. And I have to be completely honest, it wasn't my idea. My wife, Denise, said we were having lunch before coming home, and she was like, why don't you try and do this? She's like, you know a lot of people. You write for all these rock magazines. At the time, I was writing for 7 different rock magazines worldwide. She's like, you know a lot of people. All these guys are doing is getting movies and promoting them, trying to sell tickets. You know a lot of people. Maybe you should try it. Because I'm always like, I would go to these shows and be like, oh man, they showed Halloween 4. I wish they showed Halloween 2. Or, that's really what it was. I remember that was a conversation that I had with Denise, and she was like, well, why don't you, then you could pick your own movies. And I was like, wow, that would be great.
What a concept, right?
What a concept. So I started looking into it. I had to find a theater that would rent, I could rent the theater for the day. Of course, the main thing is all of these festivals that I had gone to, they were all showing the movies the way they were originally shown, which was off vintage 35 millimeter film prints. And I was still friendly with Tad Leger. Tad was the drummer in the 80s New York thrash band Toxic.
Yeah.
And I've been friends with Tad for many years. Tad's an excellent graphic designer. At the time, Tad, and he still does it, Tad does graphic design work for the company out of California, which was headed up by Bob Murawski, who did the editing on the Evil Dead movies. He eventually became an Academy Award-winning editor. Bob Murawski and Sage Stallone, who's the son of Sylvester Stallone. They had a company called Grindhouse Releasing, and they had a ton of vintage 35 millimeter film prints that they would rent out to people all over the country. So because Tad worked for them, he had a relationship with them, and they were awesome. They let us borrow a few prints at no charge. They were fantastic. So thanks to Tad and thanks to Grindhouse, we were able to get some prints. So I was like, okay, we can rent a theater, we can sell tickets, we can get the prints, and the Exhumed is all of these shows like the Exhumed marathon. A lot of these movie promoters would do a festival, and then during the year they would do like a double feature or a single movie. And I was just like, well, screw it. I just want to, let's just go right to the festival.
Go big or go home, right?
That's it. Go big or go home. And like for me, like the Exhumed film guys are great, but Philadelphia is 3 hours from my house.
Yeah.
So it's easy for me to drive the 3 hours if I'm going to sit and watch movies for 10, 12, 24 hours, whatever it is. It's not really a great decision to drive 3 hours if I'm going to watch 2 movies and then have to drive home.
Right. Right.
So the idea of a marathon, that was the way to go. And it was initially Denise's idea. And the funny thing was, it was a hit. It did very well. So then I was like, well, let's do more. And she would always bust my chops because she would be like, well, I told you to do one. And
I didn't think you were going to do this like all throughout the year, Chris.
Yes. And then what happened was, we originally did it in spring, and we did, I think the original time we did it was just 5 movies. So that was like a 10-hour show, give or take. But then we're like, okay, let's do another marathon in the fall. But then besides the marathons, then they opened up an Alamo Draft House about an hour away from us in Yonkers, New York, and they knew who we were. Which was a shocker that they knew who we were. They were like, let's work together. So we started doing double features at the Alamo Draft House. And then besides that, we started to do double features at our home theater in Poughkeepsie, New York. So initially it was just one all-day marathon, and before we knew it, we were doing like 6 shows a year.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot of people have asked me over the years, how do you do it and whatever. I'm like, well, you need 2 things. You need a lot of money, and you need a lot of friends that are willing to work for you for free. And whatever money you put into it, you absolutely have to be okay with losing it all, because even though we did, I couldn't even tell you how many shows with Hudson Horror. I mean, it was nine years that I was doing the events, 9 years straight. We would make a little money, but I put it all back into the next show. I never.
Well, that's what it's all about, right? You just
right.
If it pays for itself, you just keep doing it. As long as you're not losing money, I guess it's worth it, right?
And that's it, Pete. That's it exactly. Like, I never was like, oh, I'm doing this to make money. And I always said that to anybody that ever asked me about wanting to do it. I was always like, yeah, if that's your goal, you're in the wrong business. Yeah. You got to be a movie fan, and you have to, want to do it, and you got to want to do it the right way. And we were very lucky that people came to our shows and they enjoyed it, and then they would tell friends, and they would bring friends. And we did this one was the first one, and I got to give credit to Tad and Dave, one of the guys from Grindhouse, because this is for our 4th show, and I'm wearing it today because it's the August 18th is the day, 1973. That's the date from the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. When we did our 4th all-day marathon, we were coming up with shirt designs. And Dave from Grindhouse was like, well, why don't you, because we're all rock fans, why don't you spoof Black Sabbath Volume 4 with the Hudson Horror? So it's, if you can't make it out, it's Ozzy from Volume 4, but Ozzy's face was replaced by Leatherface because we were showing, and it's got all the movies on the back with the dates, because, we're rock fans. I always wanted to double-sided
I
event shirt to tie it in, and the shirts sold like hotcakes. But what I didn't realize was people would love to wear the shirts, and they would wear them out, and they wear them to a lot of concerts. So, especially because they're double-sided, somebody would be standing at a concert or some other event, some other horror event, and people would read the back and be like, well, Hudson Horror Show, what's that?
yeah.
So it was the greatest free advertising to have, to have the shirts. But, for us, doing the shows right meant that we only showed movies off vintage 35 millimeter film. We showed old school snack bar ads and movie trailers, old movie trailers in between each movie. We didn't want anybody talking or yelling at the screen, nothing like that. We would tell people, shut up, shut the fuck up. We'll throw you out. Similar to what they do at the Alamo and the Exhumed film shows. And, that was a big thing because I've been to movie events. I mean, one time I flew to Indiana for a film festival. And I remember talking to the guy that ran the show. He was getting all these movies, and I fly out to Indiana. And when I get there, I find out that the guy was just playing DVDs. So everything was in the wrong aspect ratio. I was like, I just wasted thousands of dollars and time off from work to fly to Indiana to watch DVDs that I fucking have at my own house.
Yeah,
I could have watched DVDs at my own house if I wanted, pal. Yeah, so that also, when that happened to me, that really burned my ass. So I was like, oh, I'm gonna do a show that is nothing like this because I can. And I remember like arguing with, and he had nothing to do with it, but the manager of the movie theater, because I was like, I can't believe you guys are just putting in a DVD and hit and play. And he's like, but you can't get those movies anymore. I'm like, you totally can. Like, because I've been seeing them. So, yeah.
So what were the very first one you did? Do you remember the film lineup?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And that's an interesting point too, because there was a couple things over the years that we tried to do, and that the first thing that we did kind of didn't work out so great. So my original idea was to do 3 movies we got, and from Grindhouse, they were great. They gave us Evil Dead, they gave us Lucia Fulci's Zombie, and Pieces. And we also, at the time, Ted was coming out with Toxic was putting out a concert DVD. So we showed like an hour's worth of the DVD. And then we also did what was very popular at the time was people that would create their own movies. And so it was, but I didn't want to do whole movies. So my idea was just shorts, and we got a lot of submissions, some of which were fantastic, I gotta say. And of course, now these were all off DVD. Right. But the main thing was the movies. To me, this was the opening act, and the main headliner was the 3 movies off film. So we did like 2 hours worth of shorts, these shorts and trailers that people sent in their homemade productions, and some of which were fantastic. I mean, just mind-blowing how good they were. But my thinking was, well, let's do a contest, and whatever shorts we're going to show, we'll give like a couple free tickets. And then if, to the producer, whoever sent it in, and then the additional people, they'd have to buy tickets if they had friends or other people that were in the movie or the short rather that wanted to come. So on paper, that sounded great, Pete. The problem was we picked the very best shorts. The problem was all the good shorts, nobody lived close. So people were from like Texas and California, and I think the closest guy was a guy in Boston, and he didn't make it. So we were like, oh, nobody came, nobody bought tickets for the shorts contest. So that we never we never ran. And then also to date it, it was around the very first show. It was around the time of the untimely death of Ronnie James Dio. Of course, I'm a huge Black Sabbath fan, a huge Dio fan. So I had purchased an original vintage 35 millimeter film print of the Black Sabbath Blue Oyster Cult movie, Black and Blue. So we did it as a free mystery bonus movie. So we did the whole show. We did the shorts, the Toxic video, Pieces, then Zombie, then Evil Dead, and then we were like, show's over. But if anybody wants to stay, we have a free bonus. We're not charging anybody anything for this. It's just we're here, and we had a few people that stuck around. It was pretty late, to be honest. But yeah, that was our very first show.
You guys always did that going forward. You would have the announced films, and there would always be a surprise.
Yes,
you wouldn't know until the day of, right? Yeah.
We kind of learned that people do really like a surprise. Like, and as you know, because you've been to a couple of them now, Exhumed Films, their big marathon is all mystery movies. So yeah, so we started to do one, sometimes two, but most of the time it would be one mystery movie, and then towards the end, for the last couple, yeah, they were all mystery movies. But yeah, it's fun. I mean, it is tough because there's always some people that no matter what you do,
they've seen
it. Not only they've seen it, they're just like, well, I don't like this. Like, I remember one time I was very excited that we were able to borrow, an original vintage 35 millimeter film print of Pumpkinhead, which Pumpkinhead never played theatrically in the New York area. And, we would always have Mike Gingold from Fangoria Magazine would come to our shows, and he is the authority on what played where. And I asked Mike, and he's like, no, this, Pumpkinhead never played the New York area. So, whatever, 20 years later, we were able to show a print, and somebody came up and was complaining at the booth, like, who picked this movie? Like, it's a piece of shit. I'm like, are you kidding? This is one of the greatest horror movies of all time.
Yeah.
But, yeah, so... You can't please everybody. And, sometimes too, people don't know the ins and outs. Certain movies are just impossible to find on film. The theater we ran was it was not a changeover system, meaning it was not two separate projectors. It was I can't think of the name now because I got the old Pete's. But it was called a platter system. Where you connect the entire film, you make it all at once, and it's like a giant roll. But that's a little rougher on the film. And so certain people that we dealt with, or certain film studios, like I remember one time, whatever studio had the print of Night of the Creeps, they would not let us borrow Night of the Creeps because we didn't have a changeover system. We had the platter system. So, it was always tough finding the prints. And then finding the rights. That was the other thing too. You get the movie, but then you have to license the screening. So you need to rent a theater. You need to pay for the theater. You need to get your own insurance. You need to find the movies. You need to license the movies. And then you got to advertise. And then you got to sell your tickets and answer questions because people are now emailing you and Facebooking you and asking you 99 questions. What time's the show start? When's it end? Can my babysitter come? Am I allowed to bring food?
Is there a break? Yeah, all that kind of stuff.
Are there breaks? I want to come late. Can you charge me less? I want to go home early. Can you charge me less? Shit like that. Or, like they showed in one of the commercials. People buying tickets, people buying 2 tickets and then taking up 4 seats because they want to put their coats and shit on the seat. It's like, no, dude, you can't do that. This is not the mall. And because we would sell out every show.
Right.
We got to be so popular that the theater we were in had 8 screens. So we got so popular that we went from 1 screen to 2. And how we would do it was we would mirror the same program. So, like, let's say we were doing Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, and Army of Darkness were, let's say that was 2 of our 6 movies. Well, on screen 1, we would do Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and on screen 2, we would do Army of Darkness, and then we would swap those movies so that it didn't matter which screening room you were in, you were seeing the same exact show, just in a different order.
Gotcha.
But, you know, there's logistics to that too, because of running times and break times. And of course, you know, I never wanted to send people home on a downer. So like, sure, we showed some movies that were depressing and dark, like Maniac, I Spit on Your Grave, Don't Go in the House. But I would never end the show with that.
Something like that. Exactly.
I always wanted something, you know, a happier movie like Halloween or Nightmare on Elm Street or whatever, Evil Dead. You know, always send them home happy rather than you know, ending on a glum note.
So what was the sellout for you guys for like a good festival as far as number of tickets go?
It was like the 2 screens were like 150-ish per room.
Okay.
So for us, you know, a sellout was like 300-ish. And it got to be so big that there were certain spots in the theater that had like just a little, enough room for a folding chair. So I would put like folding chairs in, you know, maybe not many, maybe like 5 or 6, but that was an extra.
Couple extra people in, right?
Couple extra people. So yeah, it was around 300-ish, give or take, from what I remember.
How challenging was it for you to secure the films you really wanted to show? I mean, that must have been at times a bit of a chore to try and track down where can I go and buy or rent a print of this film that I would really want to show.
Very tough, Pete. Very tough. And that's why, you know, sometimes, you know, people's expectations would be up here, and it's like, okay, well, listen, you know, there is no 35 millimeter film print that I can get of Creature from the Black Lagoon. Right. That I can get. You know, there are prints out there because I've seen it, but you know,
and thousands of dollars, right? When you have a budget for so much, right?
And again, we're a platter system. Now we were not a changeover, so that's, you know, rougher on the film. So it was difficult. You know, what I would do was early on, I made as many contacts as I could and get as many lists from different people as I could. And then when, you know, the show would come up, I'd be like, okay, let me get this from this person, this from that person. And like I said, you know, but it's not only getting the movie, it's securing the rights. So sure, you know, you could get Conan the Barbarian off 35 millimeter film, but you got to contact Universal Pictures and be like, hey, this is who I am. You know, can you please license me? You know, can I please purchase a 1-day screening license
for 300 people? Right.
Yeah, for 300 people. And then, you know, most of the studios were great, but and I can't remember the exact percentage, but some of them were like, okay, well, you know, give us 35% of the gross. And I'm like, no, this is a marathon, you know, because that's what they do sometimes. Typically it's either a flat fee or it's a percentage if it's a 1 movie screening.
Right.
But I'd be like, listen, guy, I'm doing 5-6 movies. If I give everybody 30%, that's 180%. I'm losing money. So, you know, throw me out a flat fee and I'll do it. But it was a lot of money, you know, doing these shows. That's a lot of money. And yeah, a lot of help from a lot of friends, which I couldn't have done without it. You know, I had one, my buddy Errol was doing he was doing like the publicity and the promotions. My buddy Sean was the one that would help me track down the film prints, and he was collecting the film trailers. You know, my buddy Glenn did all the IT stuff for the website. My friend Marcos would work the front desk with my wife. He would collect the money, collect the tickets, all that sort of stuff. I had, my friends James and Ann would help sell the T-shirts. You know, Tad would do the design work for the posters and the T-shirt work My buddy Dez, who he would do the T-shirt work too. I mean, so
Everybody had a function, but it was all very important and needed, right?
exactly. And without all these people, there was, because it was a ton of work on its own, and I still barely got it done with everybody's help. My buddy Dan would corral all the vendors, because we had a big room that we would pack like 20 vendors. So Dan would talk to all the vendors, charge them a small fee just so we get something out of them, to put towards all the overall expenses. But the vendors would come, and some of these vendors, like Vinegar Syndrome, they would make a killing at our show, because, okay, there's only 300 people, but it's 300 hardcore movie followers.
Probably 80% of them are going to spend a couple $100 on merch, on DVDs, Blu-rays, all that kind of stuff.
That's it, exactly. And they were great, because like we ran a 35 millimeter print of the movie Madman, which was done up in Connecticut. So we had some of the cast and crew members that Vinegar Syndrome helped us get, and they came and they introduced the movie, and we showed the movie, and then they signed autographs. And as soon as the movie ended, everybody ran out and were buying up copies of Madman on Blu-ray, and we had the cast and crew signing them.
Now, how often did you do that? Have cast and crew from various films? I know I've seen clips and things of all sorts.
We did a few times. We had
some of the Spookies crew was there.
Yes, we did. We did it with Spookies. We did it with Madman. We had Felissa Rose and a couple other people from Sleepaway Camp. Yep. So just a handful of times. And again, that ties into, we did talk to some, celebrity guests for doing the events. Like I talked to the agent for Laurie Cardill from Day of the Dead. I talked to who's the girl from I Spit on Your Grave? Camille Keaton.
Yeah.
I talked to her directly, but the problem is, like, none of these people were close. So like, they needed like a guarantee. Like Camille Keaton needed to be flown in from Florida, and she needed a hotel room and all this other stuff. And I was like, listen, the show is already sold out, so I can't make more money off you because I can't sell any more tickets.
Right.
So with all these people, I'd be like, I'll give you a free table, which is what we did with the Madman people, or the Sleepaway Camp people, or the Spookies people, but I can't make more money. I'm maxed out on seats. So if you want to come and sell whatever you want, you keep 100% of your profit. You're welcome to it.
Yeah, they're not going to help you sell more tickets. You've already sold the tickets.
I already sold them all. I mean, it was, the tickets, and I did feel that was probably the worst thing about Hudson Horror, and it was just, there was no there was no way around it when the show sold out and more people were trying to get in, and like people would email me or ask me at the show, and I felt terrible because I'm a fan and I have been shut out of shows. And Pete, there's always, I know it's happened with you too, but there's no more room.
What are you gonna do? Can't sit on someone's lap. I mean, right. How many people would show up the day of looking to buy tickets, and there isn't anything?
Well, early on, that was the thing. Like a lot of people, because I was sweating it, like for the first two shows, because we didn't get a ton of advance tickets. And I remember going into the first show, I was like, well, if we lose everything, it's a couple $1,000, it's not going to break me. But what happened was, day of the show, people just walked up, and it was probably like 50-50. 50 people, 50% were advance tickets, and then maybe even more, maybe 60% were walk-ups. But what happened was, once it happened, and maybe it was show 4, I don't remember. But once it was an advanced sellout, and people were like, "Oh shit, I can't wait on this."
Got to get them immediately.
And it just snowballed. And then sometimes our website would crash because we had so many people trying to log in and buy the tickets. So that was always, I felt, the worst part, but there was no way around it. I felt bad when anybody couldn't get in to get a ticket. But yeah, once the advance sales really kicked in, which was great for me because then I didn't have to worry about making up flyers and making appearances and going
Done.
on the radio.
You're not
It
chasing
was just like,
anybody.
okay,
You've already sold them already. Yeah.
that's it. I was like, well, show sold out. The show sold out. In fact, the funny thing is the last couple of years, people thought that we had stopped doing shows, which we hadn't. We just stopped advertising because there was no reason to, because the show was already sold out.
Yeah. That's a good feeling, right?
Oh, it's a great feeling. That was
a lot of work you don't have to do.
Yeah. And that was great too. That also, like I piss on modern wrestling sometimes. It pisses me off because they don't tell you anymore what the matches are, like when we were kids, Pete. They just say, oh, the show is going to be at the Meadowlands, and then the day before,
get your tickets now.
You find out what the matches are.
Right.
So what started to happen was the tickets would sell out so quickly that I could just make it all mystery movies, and I had a little more time to figure out what movies to get because I didn't have to secure the movies first and then license them and then advertise them. So
right, because initially probably people are like, well, I want to see that lineup of films. I know what they are, so I'm either going to go or not go depending on what the films are. But when you've already sold all the tickets before you even announce one film, who cares? Just surprise them. They want to be there so bad, it doesn't matter what the lineup is, right?
And thankfully, we built up a lot of trust with people because they came to the regular shows and, we showed them the Phantasms and the Texas Chainsaw Massacres and the Evil Deads and the Halloweens and Nightmare on Elm Street. So they knew that we were going to give them a good show. So they gave us that trust of, okay, well, it's all mystery movies, then I still want to go. But what was nice, too, was that because the people were more trusting and we'd already shown them so many of the hits, so many of the well-known movies, we could dig a little deeper and show a few of the more obscure stuff, which is the things I really like because, we let's face it, we've all seen Halloween and Halloween 2 and Evil Dead 2 a million times. So we could dig a little deeper and play something like, Rolling Thunder or Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires or, the Alien Space Avenger. We could really get weird. And most of the people seem to really, really like what we were showing.
What was for you, after all the ones that you've done, what was the most fulfilling lineup of films that you ever showed personally, as well as which specific festival went over the best with the crowd because I'm sure you watched and surveyed to see like which, people were so into today's lineup of films. It's like, is there one or two specifically that really stand out for you?
Unfortunately, that one's a really tough one to answer because I was never, I shouldn't say never, but most of the time, I was not in the theater when the movies were running.
Gotcha. Yeah, you weren't.
Because there's just, between the tickets and the vendors and running up and down to the projection booth and, what I would usually do is I would usually sit in to to catch the audience reaction to the trailers. And I love trailers. But I don't know if there was one particular lineup that went over better or not. They all seem to go over pretty well. One story which cracks me up, and it was the second festival we ever did, and it was 5 movies. We did. We announced 4 with 1 mystery movie, and we if I remember right, I should have talked. My buddy Sean has all the records. I should have talked to him before because he would have sent me the lists. But if I remember right, on one lineup we did, was it Alligator, Cannibal Holocaust, Dr. Butcher, and something else. Oh, maybe it was The Bird with the Crystal Plumage from Dario Argento, and a 5th mystery movie. And I think that those 4 right there, I think that's a pretty good lineup. But what happened was we had a forum on the website. This was before Facebook and everything else. So I remember there was one guy who had gone to the first show and loved it, and then he went in the forum and he shit all over that. He's like, this lineup sucks. I'm not going to this. Blah blah blah. And then we added that we decided to the mystery movie we would announce in advance, and that was Return of the Living Dead. And then that same guy posted, is like, oh my God, this is the greatest lineup ever. I can't wait to. I'm like, seriously?
The one movie.
It's the one movie. That's it. But with these other 4 classics, he thought was garbage. But Return of the Living Dead, which is the most common of those 5 movies, he's like, oh, this is great. I can't wait to go. And I'm like, right then and there, I was like, Jesus, you really can't please everybody.
No, you can't.
There's just no way.
You can't.
Yeah.
So was COVID kind of for now the end of Hudson Horror?
Yeah, unfortunately, what happened with us timing wise, we ran for 9 straight years. We did 18 all-day marathons, and I'm not even sure how many double and triple features. And we showed, I don't know, well over 100 something movies. I don't know if we hit 200, but we did a lot of movies, and we never repeated anything. But what happened was at the end of 2019, so we had our fall show in 2018. 2018, and then in early 2019, so like January of 2019, the theater that we had run for 9 years straight, we rented, which really was our home, which was our perfect place for Hudson Horror, and everybody loved it. They had issues. The owners of the business had issues with the health department. Like there was leaks in the bathroom, and not some theaters didn't have heat, some theaters didn't have air condition. It was a problem. The managers of the theater were amazing. I'm still friends with them to this day. But listen, once the health department gets involved and that train gets rolling, they had plenty of warnings. Long story short, eventually the health department came and said, you've got all these violations. The owner of the building, which is a mall, said, you know what? You guys are late on your rent, and now we've got all these health department citations. Pack up your shit. You're done. So that was in early 2019. So I did start to look for another venue, but I was like, all right, well, let me take some time too, because it was a lot of work. Because I had my full-time job, I had the Hudson Horror Show, and I was still writing for several rock magazines, doing band interviews, concert photography, and concert reviews. So I was like, all right, well, let's take the rest of 2019 off, bring it back in early 2020. And then in early 2020, I did find another venue that I was interested in. I even dropped like $700 or $800 on a couple 35 millimeter film prints. And then in a couple weeks, COVID hit. So I was like, okay. So yeah, here we are 2.5 years later, and a lot of things are back. But, every time we think something's better, now monkeypox and this one and that one. And I don't know. I'm definitely torn. I would like to bring it back, but I would like to know that it's also safe. But also, I have friends that are still just freaked out. They won't go to the movies at all. Some of the people that were my staff are freaked out, and they have not returned to going to concerts and going back to movies, even though they're vaccinated. Yeah. And so I'm sure in general, there are some people that used to come to Hudson Horror that still have that same feeling. So I haven't completely ruled it out. I think at this point, or at the end of August, I'm like, possibly in the spring of next year. That way I still have some time to figure some things out. But yeah, if we were going to do it, I think that would be the earliest. I know a lot of places are back, but Pete, like you and I went to the Colonial Theater a couple times, and even though restrictions were down, the Colonial Theater still wanted to see vaccine cards and stuff, and they were checking in, and I'm just like, I don't want to deal with any of that, because when I did do the shows, I had to worry about the people getting in, the heat, the air condition, the projection, the
All the other
sound,
stuff, yeah.
the vendors, feeding the staff, the film prints breaking, 99 other things. The last thing I want to deal with is vaccine cards or checking status of anything or whatever. And I will be completely honest. I would get sick right after every Hudson Horror Show anyway, because I would run myself into the ground, work my ass off, and then the day of the show, I couldn't tell you how many hugs and handshakes and kisses I got from people because they enjoyed the show so much.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'd love to say that after every handshake I ran and washed my hands, but I didn't, because I had to run upstairs to the projection booth or check on this or check on that. And so come Monday, Tuesday morning, I would be sick as a dog. So yeah, it happened every time, almost every time. So, you know, I'm hopeful at some point that we can, you know, bring it back, because I do kind of miss it. Because the best thing about it was being like, hey, you know what? I've never seen, you know, the Switchblade Sisters projected off 35 millimeter film. Nobody else is fucking showing it. I don't care. I want to see it.
Right.
So that's what I did. And, you know, people were very trusting of my taste. And I was, my own taste, I like to say that we did drive-in trash. You know, like there's a lot of movies that I wouldn't, not a lot, but movies I wouldn't run because to me they were too highbrow. Like I wouldn't show The Shining or Rosemary's Baby or Silence of the Lambs. Yeah, these are horror movies, but they're so like highbrow. You know, like I wanted to show stuff that was trashier, like, you know, the Thing or the Vampire Lovers or whatever, stuff that was just trashier that I, you know, got more of a kick out of.
Well, and a lot of the other films you mentioned they're classics, but everybody's probably seen them tons.
Absolutely.
Of times, right? So
although, you know, what would be surprising, you know, we would show something like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, you know, the original, or even, you know, Day of the Dead, you know, which is a classic that you would think everybody had seen. Be like, okay, raise your hands. Who's never seen this? And a lot of people, a lot of the younger people would raise their hands, and we'd be like,
here's the thing, even what's even cool about films like that is, even though, like, for instance, myself, I've seen Texas Chainsaw Massacre a ton of times in my life. I've never seen it in a theater off a 35 millimeter print. So, right. So remember we went to Exhumed last year. The first film they showed was The Exorcist. It's one of my favorite films of all time. I've seen it a ton of times. I've never seen it in a theater off a 35 millimeter, right? So,
absolutely. And and we definitely had people that thanked us, you know, for that sort of thing. In fact, I remember the particular print that we borrowed of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the original, was pretty beat up. Oh, and I remember at one point it even split, and we had people that came up and thanked us because they were like, the film was so beat up, it added to the experience. Like, oh, cool. And then sometimes we would have people would just read into things. Like we would do, my buddy Sean would collect the trailers, and then, you know, we'd pick out which trailer would go in between, you know, which movie. But sometimes Sean would theme it, but sometimes it was just, hey, what haven't we shown yet? So like one time we showed, I got a really rare trailer. It's even rarer than the movie, for the Black and Blue, which cost me 3 times as much for the 2-minute trailer as the whole movie. So we did like Black and Blue, and then we did a Godzilla trailer. And we had people coming up to us, be like, I saw what you did there. You know, Black and Blue, Blue Oyster Cult does the song Godzilla. Then you showed a Godzilla trailer. When we were like, okay, we didn't do that on purpose. That was just some random thing that just kind of happened. But yeah, people would, you know, look for certain things or be like, oh, those trailers, that was a hint for what the movie was going to be. And we were like, oh, you figured it out. And reality, it was like, had nothing to do with it. It was just all random.
Did you see a lot of the same people at each festival?
Oh yeah, we had a lot of return business. And we had a lot of people that would come to our show because we ran it similar to Exhumed or the Alamo, where we didn't want anybody reciting lines, yelling at the screen. And we did hear too that we heard sometimes that our festival was like for real movie fans, and some of the other places got people that were like the hipsters that just wanted to laugh at everything because it was old. And we heard from quite a few times that your place is the real deal. It's for the real movie fans, which I took as a huge compliment.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah,
pretty cool. So if you decide when and if to do this again, you've got a venue already kind of set aside.
I got a venue in mind. The main thing is I do need to do a logistical test of sound and projection, and it might have to be a BYOC, bring your own chair kind of thing. So I do need to test some things out before I would make an official announcement and put the tickets on sale. And the clock is kind of ticking because let's just say if I were to do a show in spring of 2023, I would need to get the tickets on sale in like January of 2023. And so I need to get my logistical tests done between now and then. And hell, if I got it figured out earlier, I could get the tickets on sale earlier. And it's been a couple years. Everybody's older. So the people that used to go, are they going to come back?
Well, may not. You'd have to count on new people, right? Yeah.
Yes, and that's my biggest concern. Okay, how many old timers have moved away or are no longer interested in this sort of thing, or now have kids and they're too busy, which is the common thing for, well, why haven't you gone to a concert in 15 years? Oh, my wife shit out 2 kids, so I'm not allowed to go see Slayer anymore.
Yeah.
That's my biggest concern of like, wow, okay, how many people from the fan base would come back? Yeah, I have no idea.
The cool thing is, so in that time period since you stopped doing Hudson Horror, we've got this little show right here.
Yeah, absolutely.
That, thousands of people watch every week, and I'm sure there's a good percentage who live in the traveling area that would want to come to something like this,
which would be awesome. Yeah, it would be awesome to help spread the word for sure, because when we started the first show, it was old school, Pete. It was flyers. We did flyers, and we had a few websites that we did some interviews with, and that was it. And thankfully, once it got going, it was a lot of word of mouth, which still is better than anything else.
Yeah. Cool. Well, we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
We'll see. I'm assuming you already have the movies set aside that you would play.
Well, the crazy thing is, we already had we already probably own 15 movies that we never ran anyway.
So there you have it.
So
that part's done.
That part's done. Yeah. There's but there's always new movies that new prints that are turning up. So yeah, we definitely have stuff we could run for sure. And yeah, because we went along, we would acquire movies and be like, okay, we'll get to this one, and then oh no, we'll do that one the next one after, and sometimes you just push it back. I remember the last show we did, which was Don't Go in the House, which is a fun one, but it is kind of bleak.
Yeah.
But we were originally going to show that at show number 1. And I didn't get to show that until marathon number 18.
Wow, all the way at the end.
Because it just kept getting bumped. And then, okay, we had the open slot. I was like, all right, let's do that one.
Wow.
So yeah, you never, it was always a juggling act. That was the other thing too. Like I always liked to do like wrestling. You have your scientific match, then you have your bloody match, you have your match with comedy, your ladies match, your tag team match. So there's a little bit of everything, so that if I don't like this, you like that. Well, that's kind of like how I liked to do the show. I would like to have a zombie movie and a rubber monster movie, and then a slasher, and then a psychological thriller or an exploitation movie.
Right.
Like I never wanted to do like 5 slasher movies in a row
Right.
or 5 monster movies in a row. It's just, you know, I always wanted to have a balance.
Way to do it. Give them
Yeah.
variety. A little something for everybody, I usually call
That's
that.
it. Little something for everybody. Absolutely.
Cool. So for those of you watching, you know, maybe some of you who are coming into the area October 1st for Sea Tranquility Fall Fest, would you
Absolutely.
be interested in coming back in the spring of next year for a day full of movies? We'll see.
Yeah.
Right. Chris has got some work to do.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
So cool. All right. Well, Chris, thanks a lot for sharing all
Absolutely,
these
Pete. Thanks for having me.
You know, you and I have talked about this like quite a bit over the years, but I think it's really good to kind of hear the whole story. So thanks for sharing that with everybody. So, and I'm curious, any regular viewers out there watching, you know, watching the Monsters Den every week, how many of you actually have attended a Hudson Horror Festival in the past? There were quite a few of them. So put your stories down in the comments below. And visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on YouTube all together, all the damn time. Stay tuned next week. We'll have the rest of the crew back. We're going to do a little kind of discussion and retrospective of the 3 films of Mr. Robert Eggers, okay, who has done The Witch and The Lighthouse and The Northman. So we're going to kind of talk about all 3 of those films and what we think of those. So that's coming up next week. And so stay tuned for that. Please subscribe if you haven't already and click on that notification bell. Also hit that like button before you leave us here today. And we've also got the links down below for our merch page where you can get all sorts of cool Sea Tranquility stuff, as well as our Ko-Fi page for channel donations. And we'll see you next week here on the Monsters Den. For Chris Alo, I am Pete Pardo. Good night, everybody. Hudson Horror.